Dr. Power, guests have arrived.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bonnie. Bonnie Castle, I'll have another sherry if you wouldn't mind.
You got it.
Thank you. Hi, folks. Come in and have a seat. Yeah, good. Two more over here. Well, I'm so glad you could join me. This is week 5 as we move towards the latter half of the course. I hope you continue to enjoy it. A couple of administrative things I think I'll talk about first. One is the Sleeman case. I'll release that on Friday night, my thoughts on it. I want to give this caveat, if I can, that the questions that I gave you to consider in your case study are at a certain surface level. To have that dialogue, they're for practice only. Talk to your colleagues, practice what tools you'd use. In the feedback I'll give you, I've added some extra information that you didn't have in your analysis and in the case, but if I was doing it in a more drilling down situation, you would have this extra data and hence maybe more sophistication to some of the thoughts that you had. So my message is, don't be alarmed by the materials that I release on the Sleeman case as being far more detailed than anticipated. I will not expect that on the exam at that level, but I thought for interest and as practitioners, you'd like to see some of the other thoughts that you might have considered had you had the extra data, just in the sake of interest of what John Sleeman was able to do through mergers and acquisitions and taking a small little corner brew pub and taking it to the 3rd largest in Canada is quite outstanding, and doing it basically with other people's money. So that's the story in the Sleeman's case. The next thing, I guess, is Calgary. I've got to go, as you know, to Calgary. The alumni there have been very kind to invite me out to chat with them for an hour or two on next Thursday evening. I'll stay over Friday to meet with one or two, and then I'll be back in on Saturday. So my point is that I'll not be available to you online on late Thursday, Friday, and most of Saturday, but I'll be back on the stick on Sunday. And so if you have any questions that you are thinking you may have in work that you're doing, try to contact me early in the week so we can have that dialogue over the phone and sort out any concerns. If not, just leave them till I get back on Sunday, and look forward to hearing from you anytime after 12 till 5. Give me a dinkle. I'm here for you at the 250 number. Next, the assignments. Yeah, one of the assignments are due, I guess, second assignment. Yeah, I'm working on the second. We'll be working on the second assignment. I anticipate, given the time it takes to do the number, I will not have them finished before I leave on Thursday, as they come in on Sunday night. Probably about half the mark, but I'll get at them as soon as I can on Sunday, and it may be Tuesday possibly, maybe even Wednesday of the following week before I can get those feedback and the grades back to you. But you've done well in your first one. I can't imagine you wouldn't do well on the second one. And yeah, I was sitting here thinking too of in your final EL2, lots of face-to-face residency, how much I'd enjoy meeting some of you face-to-face and chatting a little bit. I designed your EL2, the strategy course you're going to take. Mike Thompson will be delivering it for you this time around. And it's a fascinating course, a fun course. And basically all you do is get a real-life company who will share with you some of their issues and challenges they face. And your whole project over 3 weeks is to apply the materials and things that you've learned with this dirty, messy little problem over the course of the program, and then give a briefing back to the executives of that company as to how you'd address their particular issues and concerns, applying the tools and models and strategy and leadership and marketing and IT, etc., that you've taken over the course. So it's a fun thing. I just want to mention that one coming up. Well, today, of course, the balanced budget is out. We touched upon it towards the end of last week. Interesting. And I guess my observations might be is that not so much that the budget is balanced. I mean, we've just crossed or about to cross the milestone of Canada being a $2 trillion economy. That's quite a milestone for our little country to be $2 trillion. That's quite a milestone. But when you talk of a gross national product of $2 trillion, and then you say that we have a $1 billion surplus, to borrow those words of sometime political scientist, what difference does it make? I'm not sure it makes a big difference one way or the other. It's close enough for government work, I guess, in the mix. But it's interesting to see how they got there. I mean, they've done it. It says in here that what they've done is on employment insurance premiums, they've overcollected. They've overtaxed small business and regular businesses each and every month for their employees, building up a surplus in the employment insurance premiums. And now what they've done is simply take it back out of that fund. Not their money. They're taking it back out of that and putting in general revenues and carry on taxing businesses. And so it's just another form of hidden tax that they're relying upon. And the second thing they attribute it to is the aspect in here of the of the contingency. You know, most businesses, when you do your business, you may grab a figure of, say, 5% in your cash flow projections for unforeseen things happening. In this case, the government has reduced its contingency down to 1%, on the assumption that the price of oil will go back up to 70 some odd dollars a share. And if that happens, then the revenues for them will keep the budget balanced. If it stays down at the current levels of around $56 or drops lower, then of course the budget will not be balanced. But it's interesting to see, but it's the same thing that the province here does in BC. I don't know how Ontario, but I imagine it's much the same, but the province here claws back from BC Hydro, from BC Ferries, from ICBC, out of their general revenues and takes it and puts in the general revenues of the government at the end of each year, hundreds of millions of dollars, which again just amounts to another tax of people using ferries, paying for insurance, or paying the electrical bill. That's just being clawed back. And so I guess, yes, a balanced budget, that's probably a good thing. $1 billion, as Shania says, doesn't impress me much. It's tweedledee, tweedledum. But there's many good things in the budget I want to talk about in a few minutes. I notice here in the story, too, we talk about immigrants and coming across from Libya primarily into Italy as part of the European Union. Then they get free transit anywhere in the northern states of European Union. And it's a concern when you see these souls coming across and the tragedies that have taken place. This need of mobility and safety of people looking for a warm, comfortable place to sleep at night. And it's not just these folks of this current. In Canada, off BC, our coast, we had 500 people came in the Sun Sea, I think was the name of the boat. 500 people at Sun Sea about 5 years ago. Just immigrants coming in from Sri Lanka. And it was just a tragedy, just horrendous conditions that our Coast Guard brought them ashore in. And I have to confess, I haven't followed where they've gone at this point over 5 years. But immigration is a concern, and it's a challenge. There's a certain tension there, but I guess the question for us might be as leaders, as decision makers, what is the role for us in playing immigration for these folks that arrive on our shores, not coming through the proper lineups, as America is now facing? What should our position be? Why don't we talk for a minute about that this week? I see Russia is facing work protests. Increasingly, there is tensions building within Russia as the economy tightens down because of the sanctions that the West has put on it. And increasingly, workers, notwithstanding, they get talked to quite severely, it says here, to evade the wrath of officials trying to minimize unemployment in the district. So they really get chewed out when companies say we have to lay folks off because we just can't make a turn of it. And so we have this situation going in Russia of increasing protest in the streets and unemployment there. And I know here that it's a 15% increase over last year with respect to the folks who have been unpaid and wage arrears. And so it's getting worse over there. People for up to 4 months haven't received a paycheck. And that can't go on. I mean, that's what drives things like Arab Spring. So if we watch for that in Russia, we could talk a bit, maybe look a little deeper into it. I see the Bar Society is trying a new thing. The problem is, of course, is that the gatekeepers in the medical profession, the Medical Association and the Bar Society and law, are the gatekeepers for how many can come in, get qualified, and take their place in the community and sell their services. And the Bar Society has opened up their floodgates. They allow quite a number of folks through, to the point that it says in here that there's not enough places for articling. The normal thing for lawyers is you take your 3-year law program, but before you can take the bar admissions course, there's a requirement that you work for 9 months or a year or something of that nature with a particular law firm under the tutorage or the mentorship of a practicing lawyer and pick up the skill sets with real applied practical skills for which you get paid. And it appears there's not enough law firms able to take the number that are coming through, so we have this glut of lawyers who have taken their degree but can't get into the game, and they get stale data if they sit on the sidelines. They have to put it into practice. And so the Bar Society have come up with a new program that they can do on-job training or work as co-op students and take extra courses, and that would be sufficient to get them to hang out their shingles. The question is, will that be sufficient to make them practitioners, or is there a danger on the public that they haven't had the mentorship of a senior practitioner to give them that guidance? So we could talk a bit about that and the gatekeeping by these associations. Certainly in medicine, I think all of us would like to have a family doctor, and part of the problem in part is that the gatekeepers constrict the number of bums in the seats at medical schools, as does the government with the medical programs. They don't want too many doctors to pay, and so we have this artificial blockage for all those folks that want to become doctors never can. So we can talk a bit about that this year. We talked last week about Patrick Brown, friend of the Prime Minister of India, Modi, and having the hands laid on. I see in the paper here that he has now got a war chest of almost $1 million. Just in this last little bit, he's gathering steam along with Christine Elliott as the two contenders for the Progressive Conservative leadership in Ontario. So fun to watch and to see what difference the Indo-Canadian factor makes for him moving forward. Lots in here on the tax, on the financial. I'll talk about that. Security agents, military received well, not so much the military, but it says here that the spies, Mounties, and border agents got an increase out of this new budget that came in. And looking at it, they're going to spend over $300 million in 5 years to help fight terrorism. They're going to put another $100 million funding to protect Parliament and Canadian Forces bases from terrorism. And I guess it's all about allocation of funds. I mean, I'm not Navy, I was ex-military infantry, but I worry about my colleagues in the Navy that we've got 12 frigates out there, but no supply ships. The provider and the protector of one's in dry dock and burnt out beyond getting back onto and the other one's at the end of its legs. And so when we go do joint exercises with the Americans, the Australians, and other navies, we have no way of running the gas out to them. We don't have a service truck. And so these supply ships are very much a necessity. And so I'm wondering that at one point the government might construct, I think we need about 4 of these things. We've only had 2. I think we need 4 of them. And time now to start building because it takes quite a number of years to bring them on stream. And so our Navy is hemorrhaging and suffering right now by the lack of this ability to fill up their tanks at sea. Certainly, if we could question the money being spent, could it be spent better than we see it in the budget? Is a question. The Battle of Ypres, 100 years ago, 1st Canadian Division went in. What was interesting there is that it was the first time the Germans used gas. And it was interesting I'd read to counteract that. It was a doctor came up with a German helmet, a bit of canvas, and a little container down here with some chemicals in that would wash the gas and make it reasonably good for breathing. And that was enough to save so many lives out of the gas attacks that were a complete surprise and shock to Canadians. But bless their hearts, they stood their ground and died where they stood. But anyway, Ypres, 100 years ago. We have Morsi, Brotherhood president of Egypt, sentenced to 20 years in prison. Whichever way it goes, I guess I can zoom out for a minute. The issue for me is that we talk about the importance of rule of law. And in this particular case, he was tried by a judicial panel that was really under the direction of the government military wing, and over there it is a military running it currently. And so, much like China, that the courts there are underneath the government, and so government can't interfere with the direction of the court. And in our country, that doesn't happen with great frequency. It's to be free and untouched and able to make its own independent decisions. Now, we may have a discussion about that both here in Canada and within the States. That's what the Constitution provides for. Whether it happens in reality or not to some extent, maybe that's worth a discussion. I see Saudi stopped bombing the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and what we have happening there, of course, is the 2 major powers in the Middle East. We have the Iranians with the Houthi and supplying and doing that, and then we have the Saudis with airplanes screaming back and forth. Al-Qaeda's in there, and now the Americans has a fleet to include an aircraft carrier going in, trailing. I'm not sure it's 7. I think the Americans have 12 ships there, and the Iranians have 7 ships moving towards a port. The time you see this, I suspect it will unfold. A little unclear as to what's exactly going to happen, whether those 7 ships will be allowed to offload, much like the Cuba crisis, middle crisis in the 1962. It seems to be rearing its head that we have these fleets coming to a point, a node, that they're going to have to make a decision to board those ships or to stop them from landing and spewing out whatever resources they brought to support the Houthi or not. And so we'll watch for that this week. But it's certainly our attention. Keep in mind these are choke points as to where the oil flows. and it doesn't take much in a 20-mile little channel to disrupt the flow of oil. And indeed, that's why we see the price of oil moving up to some extent these days. Site C dam approval. We have a nice parcel of land up around Fort St. John, nice river valley. Want to put in there a dam, back up the water, cover wonderful farmland, animals, First Nations cemeteries, burial sites are all going to be underwater. And the environmentalists came in and gave a ruling that don't do it. It's against the environmental concerns. You're going to do this, this, and this. And it appears that the British Columbia government has stepped in and said, no, we'll override that and go ahead and we have the right to ignore these environmental recommendations, go ahead and build it. And so it seems to have the claim to go ahead. And as we've talked before, then where's this electricity go? And in large part, once completed, it will go to California to solve their problems. So it's our land being flooded and we're selling it to California. And I just wonder about, as we've talked about alternative energy, if we put the same sort of energies and monies into subsidizing some solar panels or some heat pumps and things of that nature for us, could we not reduce our electricity draw and feed back into the grid if we started thinking a little more seriously about alternative energy? So anyway, a thought for conversations. Nice time for gardening this time of year. We got some of our stuff done in the back. Talked about Iran, present current. Okay, let's see what this one's all about. Yeah, so gold is at 1,200, pretty well unchanged. Oil is coming down a little bit at 56. Our dollar's up almost to 82 cents this week. Not unexpected. I think we talked about it last week when it was 78 or something. So it's starting to move. Canadian Pacific Railways found their amount of oil that they've hauled has dropped by 26%. And not surprisingly, as the oil coming out of primary Alberta is greatly diminished. But it's certainly going to impact the Keystone Pipeline, as well as the Canadian Pacific Railway. I can recall about the fall of last year, the big cry was capacity for the railways, that we had so much wheat coming off as a bumper crop of wheat off the prairies, but insufficient trains to move them to the coast to ship it and export it. And so we had a lot of farmers out there having their wheat left in silos and rotting and going bad because we didn't do the planning on resource leveling that should have taken place. And so part of this will all come into the mix, I guess, as we see this thing going further. Pension enhance for Air Canada's CEO. Nice thing for him. They've just agreed to give him to double his retirement pension to $791,300 a year at age 65 in about 3 years. So that's a nice little thing. But again, that trajectory between the haves and have-nots. Just another story again this week. Story in here about small business, part of the tax incentive break, and on that I have to give Harper full marks. Individual right wing, Attila the Hun, all the stuff we talk about, that's my bias. And so I was absolutely delighted when he talks in terms of small businesses having their tax rate drop to 9%. That's what Porter talks about by making the ground fertile for development. I'm pleased to have it. It'll help small business and will help drive the economy. Our Finance Minister Oliver said that small business drive the energy of Canada and economy of Canada, and I agree with that. Unfortunately, Barry McKenna took the other position and said that's not true. He said it's Canada's engines of growth are the large companies, not the small ones. Well, we both have a different opinion of that, because I think 98% of the businesses in Canada are small businesses, and they deal with the small corner lawyers and accountants and banks, etc., as opposed to a large company that will have one bank, one big law firm, one big accounting firm. And my understanding is, my readings tell me that, and I stand to be corrected on this, but small business to me is the driving energy, driving the economy for Canada. But anyway, it's a good point. I'm pleased with what he did. Germany's got this problem on asset bubbles. The European banks are, with quantitative easing gearing its head up, there's concern out of Germany about another bubble, asset bubble, primarily in real estate, that they think with the extra money at low interest rates is going to drive such a way that they're going to be concerned about will the real estate prices explode in Germany. and certainly concerned. But what we can get out of that story for a few minutes is most countries have at their, Canada has certainly, at their ability two levers. You have the financial lever, the fiscal lever, and that's what we saw with our finance minister talking in terms of the budget. Through the budget, they control the economy of Canada by taxes for small business, things we've just talked about. And the other lever is the monetary lever, and that's by the Bank of Canada that controls sort of the interest rates. And so independent countries like Canada have these two levers to pull on to adjust the economy and tweak it as required. But in the European Union, they've given up the lever on the monetary policy, on setting the interest rates over to Brussels, and they set one size fits all for all nations. And part of that is the problem, of course, that we see today in Greece and Spain. And so Germany is faced with this. They've only got one lever to work. They've surrendered their lever over to the monetary policy, to the European Commission. So it's worth watching. In fact, another sidebar that I don't know if we talked about this in this class or not, but the Germany concern about a run on banks and things of this nature is trying to get its gold back that it put there in the 1960s as a result of the Cold War. And I think I've mentioned to you they put it in Britain, put it in France, and put it in the in Fort Knox for the Americans. And then Angela Merkel, bless her heart, about 18 months ago, about a year ago, asked for it back, that they want the gold back in Germany for such a situation as a bubble blowing up. And the Brits, bless their heart, returned the funds. The French said we can't do it, and the Americans said we can't do it. It'll take about 18 years to get it all back to you. And they did give them a little bit back to see it, but it was interesting. What they got back in bars was not the traditional way you see gold. It comes with a serial number and weight and some sort of tracing marking on it. And the Germans knew what marks were on theirs when they put it in, but they got back nondescript plain bars without descriptors on it. And it's quite troubling, but it hasn't blown up yet in the papers, but it's something you might want to look at and Google that, and your concern about the need for Germany and the European Union to have its gold back in its own ground for this sort of situation if there's a large bubble to burst over there. But certainly they're in the process of doing more quantitative easing, and we could talk about that as being a bad or a good thing. Business travel is very big business in Canada, and yes, it is. I think the Internet of Things is changing that. Skype, the ability to go to meetings and things of that nature are new ways to think about doing this, far more efficient, more effective. That's not to say the idea of having a drink with a colleague in another facility and builds bonds and relationships. So it's not as strong using GoToMeetings or the Internet of Things, but we're moving in that direction to save money and time. Certainly in BC, it says business here, but government is also part of this big business on travel. And certainly in BC, I don't think the helicopter business, airline business, running out of Halifax or out of the Victoria Harbour would survive without government. The government officials daily hop on that and flip back and forth. Taxpayers tend to wait for the ferry and take the ferry across if they got business across the way. But certainly we could save some money by cutting back the travel on Helijet and some of this travel that's taking place within government. Yeah, let's deal with it here. This is part of what's happening on the budget. There's a nice article in here, and I thought I might not read it all to you word for word, but there's some neat things in here that we should have a look at. They're going to encourage Canadian banks to increase lending to small and medium-sized enterprise, and loan guarantees are going to be up to 100% from 95%. Very positive. Lifetime capital gain exemptions on farm and fishing properties are going to be up to $1 million, which is good. The idea of Canada Revenue Agency honoring all written advice, because we've talked about this. I mean, it drives me to distraction this time of year in particular, that the tax code in Canada, nobody knows what it is with authority that they'll give you a guarantee saying what I say is true. Even the tax department won't do it. They'll issue tax bulletins, interpretation bulletins, say here's what we think it means, but you can follow that interpretation bulletin and still be found that you're offside and end up in federal tax court in Ottawa trying to resolve these issues. And so, bless their heart, they've come out here and said that they'll honor all written advice and guidelines shared on his website. Well, that's a step in the wrong direction. I'm very pleased, but we need tax reform here, as we've talked about. They say they're going to lower unemployment insurance rates on small business. Good. What else is important in here? They're going to double the amount that can be borrowed, up to $1 million for a small business to buy property, equipment, and leasehold. There's a lot in here, I guess, to my point I'm making, that may influence your strategy. And so it's important you read to see what these breaks are, to see if it's going to help you in any way that you're going to exploit and take the advantage of. And clearly, this is back to our first session, this is the tension between a Plato view of the world and an Aristotle view of the world, and Harper being on this side, right wing, less tax, less government regulation is on this side of the House, and if Mulcahy and the bunch get in on this side, you'll probably see more coming out for collectivism, socialism, and the more things for families and that to level, to redistribute wealth and bring it to this side of the table. And no wrong or right answers. They're also very specifically talking in terms of anti-corruption. They're bringing out new legislation as part of the budget to adjust the anti-corruption, saying that there's going to be a tough new anti-corruption regime for suppliers and government as they're rewriting the rules. But the reality is SNC-Lavalin is offside. If you Google SNC-Lavalin, you'll see what we're talking about, caught bribing. And as a result of that, and under the current rules, they're banned from doing business in Canada for 10 years, and IBM's in the same boat, and one or two other major suppliers have found themselves offside. So I suspect this unveiling of a tough new anti-corruption regime, frankly, will be a rewrite in such a way that SNC-Lavalin and other people can get back on side and do business in Canada. But we'll watch for it and see. I could be wrong. Education, part of what they're doing about is $65 million, aimed to match the curriculum with what the employer needs. And that is so needed in the sense that what we produce in the institution often is out of alignment with what the employer wants. And so there's a need for not just the need for post-secondary and the needs of the workplace, but also government has to be involved. And so it's the three legs of the stool have to sit down and decide what is actually needed at the other end. There's no sense everybody taking medieval history if there's not jobs for everybody doing medieval history. As we said earlier, there's no sense of putting more lawyers out in the street if there's not jobs for the lawyers out in the street. It's far better to retool the scarce resources we have into those disciplines and fields that Canada needs. And so, bless their heart, they're putting $65 million into looking at some sort of program that can get this started. Corporate boards, they're going to start both disclose their approach to gender diversity on boards of directors. Excellent. We have in Canada a glass ceiling, we have glass cliffs, and so we could talk about the need to open, fair, and balanced mobility up and down the ladders for both men and women, and they're putting some effort into doing that. Tax avoidance, another issue. They're going to give the Revenue Canada, folks with plastic shoes, are going to give them another $118.2 million to develop some more auditing teams, and another $25.3 million to crack down on offshore tax evasion, tax havens, those sort of things we've talked a bit about. And it's a big issue. Underground economy today is may not be this high, but I've heard numbers as high as $10 billion, certainly $10 billion. And that make quite a difference if there was $20 billion that taxes were paid on. That would help and lower the taxes for all of us. So the underground economy is a concern, but if you step back and say, what's driving the underground economy? I think you'd probably agree that in large part, it's the oppressive tax system that we have. That we start getting up close to 50% that you work. It was the, I didn't mention last week, but it was the Fraser Institute published that I think we have to work till the 14th of June, and every penny you make between 0 and 14th of June is for one level of government or another on taxes. Only after the 14th day of June do you start making money for yourself. And that just seems to be painful. And so, anyway, they're stiffening the folks with the hammers to go after us for tax evasion and offshore accounts and things of that nature. So there's lots in the budget, I guess is my point. Have a chance, have a look at it, see how it makes a difference in your company and your personal lives. PSFA's got increased to 10,000, that was good. The trader's accused of sparking the flash crash. I don't know if many of you can remember, it was 2010. Boy, it was that long, almost 4 or 5 years ago. The stock market crashed, like in the span of hours, it went bang, 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 bang down because the programs were all built in, and it would hit, it triggered another, and so like cascading water, the price of shares went down in an hour and a half. There were trillions of dollars lost, and they've attributed this back to one individual, Navinder Singh Sarao, S-A-R-A-O, and he was a trader, and he did layering, and layering is to build this sort of flash crash is using a computer to build in sales at small amounts, like a sell 100 shares, sell 100 shares, sell 100 shares, sell, but you just put them back to back in there, and just as fast as one is bought, another one pops up, and so you get this sense of the regular consumer, you and I watching the market, watching the results on the level 2 board, would see the stocks going bang, 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 dropping, 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 or rising, 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 and you get that herding instinct, so you want to jump on it. And then just as you get ready to jump on it, he pulls all the orders out, and next thing you know, you're left high and dry, and he reverses the trend and picks up the money that way. And highly illegal. He's been charged. He made over $900,000 US trading futures on May the 6th, one day, May the 6th, 2010, made almost $1 million just doing this flash trading and setting it up that way. But he's been caught and looked at, but it speaks to the need for a Securities Commission. In Canada, we're talking about the need for a national Securities Commission to strengthen the teeth and watch folks like this. There's an interesting bestseller called The Flash Boys about, two and a half years ago now, I think. A Canadian involved who wrote it. Royal Bank was one of the players. And it was just a matter of less than a second, but they had figured out by laying a cable, I think we talked about it already, from New Jersey to Chicago, their own little cable, they were able to find that missing second or a fraction of a second, and so they could front run. If you came in and put an order in, they'd have the program in there just before yours to shoot ahead and pick it up, make the arbitrage, the forward sweep, and you arrive in and buy it and they're out. And so, again, illegal looking at it. In fact, this fellow that wrote the book is putting together his own exchange, and I've been reading about it. It's I think it's almost there or about to be announced, and we could have a conversation with that. But it's just about available, and the guarantee is there that all trades are level and equal. Whether he trades or you trade, you're both going on the same bus to get to the order desk, and I like that. So we can look at that. Internet of Things, once again, doing great things. Google is talking in terms of when you do that organic search on Google, they're moving to the top of the line. All those that will make that their homepage will look good on a handheld device on your phone. So those ads that look good on a handheld device that you want to put an ad in, Google is putting to the top of the line when they pop up. You do that random Google search. And so the message for you and your business is do that test, that how does it look on your cell phone, your advertisement when it pops up on the Google page. If it looks nice, you'll be at the top of the list. If it looks bad, you'll go down to the bottom of the list. Certainly Amazon, using the Internet of Things, is now jumping in e-commerce into the destinations and travel, going to go up against Priceline Group and Expedia and those sort of folks. And they have the deep pockets and resources and the infrastructure to do it. But once again, it's shifting. Internet of Things is shifting. This marginal zero-based economy we talk about is bringing the cost down. How do the franchise people that bought franchises for tourism compete? Those mom and dad street corner little places that used to pop up like Century 21 on real estate, there were ones for travel. Certainly, they've got to be being knocked out of the box right now by Internet of Things and new ways of doing business, new business models. Anyway, Amazon's getting into the business. Indicators spark concern over U.S. recovery. They're talking in terms of the U.S. dollar is up 30% year to date. Stock market's up 21% year to date. But this particular fellow coming out, what bank's he from? I'm looking for it madly here. Bank of America. Michael Harnett is suggesting that it's time for a little bit of a crash here, that based on the sales inventory ratios and based on the new manufacturing, new orders coming in, both those are prime forward-leading indicators that the market is getting ready to readjust itself in a downward position. And so if you're in the market or you're looking at the relationship of the American dollar to the Canadian dollar, it may be time to watch a little closer now. The American dollar may fall and the Canadian dollar may continue its rise upwards. But let's have a look at that. Peter Drucker. I've never met Peter Drucker. I knew people who knew Peter Drucker. I have somebody brought me back one of his coffee cups autographed by Peter Drucker. I have it in my office. And bless his heart, he lived till 92, and taught at Claremont University in California up to the date he died. And that was my dream, was to teach around here till I was 92 to beat Drucker. That may not happen now, there's other things going on in my world. But anyway, Peter Drucker's 5 Most Important Questions has now been published by Wiley for $24. And it's a short distillation of neat thoughts of Drucker and his thoughts on some of the strategic management concepts and notions. I've not got the book yet. I'm going to get the book, and 144 pages sounds like a nice, succinct, hard-hitting little book, written by folks who admire Drucker. Just recently have written this little book. So anyway, if those interested may want to go on Amazon again and look for Peter Drucker's 5 Most Important Questions. I guess that's most of what we have for today. I hope you enjoyed the session. That's session 5. Here for you anytime you need me. Give me a call. Have fun. Bye-bye.